All right, all right. We are back here on Unpacking the Backpack. It is a exciting yet sad week here in the Scheninger household as we are getting ready to drive our daughter to college. Yep, going to be empty nesters. Don't know how I really feel about that, but trying to squeeze in some time to get this recording done before I need to drive from Houston up to Oklahoma, Norman actually, and that's going to be about a 6.5 hour drive, 6.5 hour drive. But looking forward to it. So on today's episode, I really want to discuss leading for impact. And, I kind of, well, not kind of, I got the inspiration for this post because as I do workshops and leadership retreats and keynotes, I always try to tie in some of the results that my team and I achieved with our teachers when I was a school leader. And as I share those results, everyone's like, "Oh, come on, Eric, how did you do that? You had a challenging population. You didn't have money. All these challenges. How were you able to do it?" So, what I then do when people follow up or as a part of the coaching work is I kind of go through some of the main actions that we took to lead for impact. And I'm kind of going to work through those today here on this episode, but I don't want you to think about, oh well, you need to do what I did. That's no. The point of books and podcasts and blogs and workshops isn't to do what the people are saying. It's how do you process? How do you reflect? How do you construct new knowledge to come up with your own ways to lead for impact? So, what does it mean? Leading for impact basically means driving meaningful, positive change rather than just managing tasks or holding a title. It starts with a clear vision and purpose, defining what success truly looks like, and communicating that why to everyone involved. Impactful leaders are also very deeply self aware and emotionally intelligent, understanding their strengths, managing their emotions, and connecting empathetically with their teams. They build a culture of trust and psychological safety that really results in open communication and empowering others through effective delegation, coaching, and genuine recognition. Ultimately, leading for impact requires continuous learning and adaptability. In a changing world, seeing setbacks as opportunities for growth is so important. It's about focusing relentlessly on results and accountability, using data to enhance decisions and holding both yourself and others responsible for achieving shared goals. You know, by constantly leading with integrity, resilience, and passion, you inspire action and create a ripple effect of positive change that extends far beyond your immediate leadership team. So, as I kind of share what leading for impact, kind of broad brush, what I want to do now is kind of walk you through all these different actions that my team and I took. And, it's very important to understand that, there's always opportunities to grow. There's no perfect leader, no perfect classroom, no perfect school district. So we need to chase growth, not perfection. And that really is the foundation of leading for impact. But here are some things that we did. And I'll try to count them out. There's a bunch, and I might lose count. But, action number one, I mandated 5 learning walks a day by each admin on my team. And there were 4 of us. So that was basically 20 walks a day, 100 a week, and roughly 400 a month. Here's the thing, everybody. for me, I couldn't help support what I did not know. So it was so important to kind of think about, what were those things that I needed to be able to do in order to support my teacher. So those 5 walks a day that really helped improve our feedback loop was important. Number two, we collected assessments instead of lesson plans 2 weeks into the future. I'm not going to lie, everyone. I'm not saying lesson plans are not important. However, working backwards from assessment, you can see and make the connection to alignment to standards, scope and sequence, level of thinking, whether the strategies align. So, collecting those assessments were key to not only bumping up the level of thinking, but to also really ensure that we were creating differentiated assessments that could truly help to measure whether our students were learning or not. Number three, this might have been the hardest thing that, this action in terms of leading for impact, that was changing the way we graded. I will put the grading philosophy in the show notes so you can see exactly what we did. But the issue that we had is we were failing students. Students weren't really failing. And that comes back to leadership. We can't point the finger and say, oh, teachers aren't doing this, teachers aren't doing that. Well, we have to think about how are we leading a culture of learning that doesn't just reflect letters and numbers, but what students actually learned. So with our grading philosophy, we ensured that there were no more zeros unless students cheated or did not turn in work in a reasonable amount of time. So we got rid of zeros. We instituted retakes and redos. No more marking period killer assignments. And probably the hardest thing was we initiated a failure floor for marking period grades. Why is this important? Because if you give a student a 20 for marking period grade, it's hard for that student to dig out. They have no hope. A 10 is an F, a 20 is an F, a 30 is an F, a 40 is an F. Basically, an F means they did not meet the baseline minimum requirements. So we put a committee together. We came to consensus on all this. We looked at the research, and all this is in the grading philosophy that I will put in the show notes. But what happened was we reduced our failures by 75% over 3 years. And in the process, saw our highest standardized test scores in the history of the school. Number four, we got rid of the dog and pony show. No more announced observations, because if you want to lead for impact, you need to expect excellence every day. So we instituted 3 full-length unannounced observations for every staff member, regardless of years of experience, because we really wanted to make sure that we were getting in to see every teacher, supporting every teacher. Now, it was a minimum of 3. So some teachers that, needed more support, we'd go in more. But having those 3 unannounced observations, and then giving teachers 24 hours to submit artifacts of evidence to, show us what they did before, what they did after, was very impactful. Number 5, we developed shared norms for every lesson. And our norms included, standards aligned learning targets, making sure that we're imparting relevance, utilizing high effect strategies, rigorous questions and tasks, and closure. So instead of kind of saying, hey, you need to kind of have all this, lesson plan, which again, I don't see too much value in, let's focus on the norms. Number 6, we created quarterly benchmarks aligned to standards and our standardized tests. So we initiated quarterly benchmarks across the high school for all of our content areas. And that was really important to kind of link back to number 7. Seventh action was dedicated PLC time. So we provided dedicated PLC time. Our district instituted half days it was like every quarter. So teachers had a half day. And then we also found ways to embed that time during the school day. So the dedicated PLC time connected to the benchmarks, and also the development and use of common formative assessments. Number eight, leading for impact is about celebrating success. So I created a monthly brag sheet called the Principals Report. And the purpose of this report was sharing teacher successes and building capacity. Uh, we put the template out, and we would get returned anywhere from 6 to 20 pages of awesomeness. This kind of filled in the gaps to kind of find out, as the leader, all the great things that my teachers were doing, but also to do my job to be the storyteller in chief. I will put some links to a sample of the principal's report into the show notes. I think I'm up to number 9. Leading for impact means getting rid of the going through the agenda faculty meetings. No one likes faculty meetings for the most part. So we kind of shifted it to focus on learning. So what we did was we flipped our faculty meetings where agenda items were pushed out for feedback, comments, and any additions using Google Classroom. And we discussed that stuff asynchronously. Staff meeting time was then focused on one question: how do we improve learning for our students? I think when we look at how we lead for impact, we have to ask ourselves, are we doing what we've always done? Because if so, we're going to get what we've always gotten. And coming back to, all right, let's do the pre-conference. Let's hear how great that lesson's going to be. And we come in that 1 or 2 times. Is that reality? So again, let's get rid of the dog and pony show from our perspective. We also wanted to turn our faculty meetings into learning meetings. Nobody wants to be after school for an extended amount of time. So we kind of took a micro-learning approach. And what we used during our faculty meetings is this is when we presented a lot of our feedback for our learning walks. Remember, 400 a month. So when we met each month, we were able to do our glows and our grows. And it's hard to give feedback and make the time when you're doing so many non-evaluative touch points. So we used our faculty meetings to really disseminate that feedback and really talk about the trends. Number 10, we created transparent action plans for our building that had quantifiable metrics to support building goals. And progress and expectations were reviewed each month. This was so important, everyone. One thing I look for as I support district and building leadership teams is we're really good. It's easy to kind of collect the qualitative evidence, the qualitative successes. But, what is that kind of overreaching action plan aligned to vision, mission, the strategic planning process that can be measured? Now, not everything should be measured, all right? I kind of am a big proponent of, 2 quantifiable goals and 1 qualitative. But as I have conversations, I often see with a lot of leadership teams the opportunity to really create more focused goals that can be measured. So with our transparent action plans, we developed the measurable goals. We had the specific actions we were going to take. We had a time frame. We also had to list out, or we made sure we listed out, what were some challenges that we kind of foresaw. And then creating attainment reports. Did we meet our goal? Why or why not? All right, number 11, created a steering committee to elicit feedback from staff and students on how we can improve culture and achievement. And leading for impact is about understanding that the voices of your staff and students are vital if we really want to move the masses. Leadership is not telling people what to do. It's taking them where they need to be. And if we really want to shift from buy-in, extrinsic, to embracement, intrinsic, it's really important to create the conditions where people can share their ideas, their opinions, their feedback, and have honest conversations. 12, leading for impact is modeling. Don't ask others to do what you're not willing to do or have not done yourself. So I led professional learning after school to model. And in the beginning, oh my goodness, everybody, it was lonely. There, sometimes no one attended. But here's the thing that's so important. You know, Once I got one person, I was excited. And then more people started coming. And then when we started planning our professional learning days, my team and I were really involved in the facilitation. Because here's the thing, if we're asking others to do A, B, C, and D, and we're not doing it ourselves, guess what, everybody? That is the opposite of leading for impact. So think about opportunities you have to not only transform your faculty meetings, but to lead professional learning. And number 13, I told you we had dedicated PLC time. Well, guess what? We made sure as an admin team that we had our own PLC to model all the things that we were asking for of our teachers. So in our admin PLC, that's when we analyzed our walkthrough data. And that data was then presented, as I mentioned, as feedback during faculty meetings. So, leading for impact from my lens, and I'll go through these really again quick, 5 learning walks a day by every administrator, collecting assessments instead of lesson plans 2 weeks in the future, changing the way we graded, creating an equitable grading philosophy, moving away from the dog and pony show to 3 unannounced formal observations for every teacher, and having those teachers supply evidence within 24 hours to create their own portfolios. Dedicate development of shared norms for every lesson, creation of quarterly benchmarks aligned to standards and standardized tests, dedicated PLC time, a monthly principals report to share successes and build capacity, flipping our faculty meetings, transparent action plans, creation of a steering committee of students and staff to get feedback, leading professional learning as the principal, and having our own admin PLC to model. So what I hope you glean from this episode is to kind of really analyze your actions and ask yourself, how am I, from my role, because leadership is not about title, position, or power, leadership is about action. How am I leading for impact? Where are there opportunities to grow? What blind spots do I need to take into account? And think about time. As we think about leadership, we have to look at how we're spending time to either manage or actually lead. Those 13 actions, everybody, that represents a fundamental shift from spending time as a manager to an actual leader of learning. And here's the thing, all these 13 items, we can connect that back to all of our quantifiable metrics, and we're able to show growth, whether it was increases in standardized tests, decreases in discipline, positive results on perception surveys of students, increasing AP scores, increasing attendance. Oh my goodness, so many positive outcomes, which again, anyone can Google what I did as a principal and you can see all that. But here's what I want you to think about. How will you lead for impact? Everybody, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Unpacking the Backpack. I will put a lot of the things I mentioned in the show notes, and if I do not, as some of you do, email me and remind me, and I will put them in there. All right, everybody, keep making a difference.